Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Mike Masciandaro. I'm from Dow Chemical. A little bit of a different topic than most of you heard next door this morning. So that was, really, wow, that's really out there. So I'm going to try to get very pragmatic here, right? And sort of the day-to-day. Been involved with business intelligence, data warehousing kind of stuff for a long time. And so I know all the buzzwords. We keep creating new buzzwords all the time. So now it's data lake and prescriptive analytics. Apparently that's what I do now. I do prescriptive analytics and predictive analytics and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, anyone have problems getting here this morning? I came in from Philadelphia yesterday. I was going to have a leisurely flight in to Dow up in Midland and drive my way down, visit our offices here, our Accenture partners' offices here in Southfield. It didn't work out. So I didn't get here until about midnight last night. But anyway, what I wanted to talk to you about is adoption, BI adoption. So, to me, the most important thing in a program is really getting use and value out of it. So we can be practitioners in this area for our entire lives, and if we're thinking about technology, and technology is important, and processes are important. If you don't get usage and adoption, then you're not driving value for your organization, simple as that. And I think in IT, a lot of people don't even think about this, or they sort of don't care about it, or they sort of run away from it, because if you delivered something and nobody uses it, it's going to be seen as a failure. So if you hide it, I guess that's okay. Check it off the list. We delivered it. Wow, that's great. That's not the message I wanted to talk about here today. Just a little bit of my background. As I said, I was from Philadelphia, PA. I came to Dow Chemical 5 years ago. It'll be 5 years on April 1. We were an acquisition of Dow, smaller chemical company called Roman Haas, based out of Philadelphia. Been involved with data warehousing, over 10 years, actually getting up close to 15 years now. So been involved with data warehousing a long time. Data warehousing, business intelligence, reporting and analytics. But I started off in mechanical engineering, and have done marketing and all those kinds of things as well. Oaks, Pennsylvania. What I wanted to sort of organize our discussion here around certain things. So, vision, strategy, and key concepts. You have a program. You should have. Thank you for coming up to.
Your adoption.
You guys can come up. No, they're shaking their head. No, I'm not. He's scary. Organize your program in terms of your vision and strategy and the key concepts that will help you achieve success from the way the program is structured. And I'll go through some of them. And I don't think that there's much of that will probably surprise or shock you there. What we achieved in Dow, the fundamental concepts are very important, but they're not enough. And it's, driving adoption in an organization is more than just getting all those pieces together. And it's sort of interesting as you sort of dissect it. It gets into, how the organization is set up, what your competition is for reporting in an organization. And so there's a lot of things that go on. And then just get down to the how-tos. A little bit about Dow. You guys probably heard about Dow, been in Michigan, right? What we like to think about in Dow, in the chemical industries, is that we're combining science and technology with macro trends around what humans need. Water, water purification, food, health, care, that sort of thing. It's interesting because if you take a look at our product lines, a lot of times you go, wow, how in the world, there's lots of them, but ultimately it's like a hierarchy. At the higher end of the hierarchy, we're trying to key into those basic human needs. So it's agricultural, consumer, lifestyle, energy, infrastructure. Pretty large company, $57 billion last year. We're still running in around that range. Our focus isn't to be a $100 billion company. Our focus is to try to drive profitability and shareholder return, so it's not necessarily top-line growth that needs to do that. Move more from a commodity company to a specialty company. We have lots of customers, lots of countries around the world, 56,000 employees and so forth. Okay, so you'll see this slide in the deck twice, because I think this is the key to what I want you to come away with today. So I'll talk about it, I'll tell you what the list is, and then we'll talk about it more, and then I'll summarize it at the end and make sure that I cover these topics. Be clear in the beginning of your program that adoption is your goal. Okay, a lot of times at the beginning of programs, that's not very clear. You know, everybody does talk about what's the payback of projects, what's the return on investment. Right? It's very hard to put a number, right? I mean, you guys probably have tried to do this. What's the ROI, payback for many years? And, you know, a lot of times, you know, you're putting something down. Who actually measures that after it's done and say, yep, we got it or we didn't? I think the thing that's important is take a look at what you're doing and how pervasive does it get in your organization? Are people talking about that, wow, you know, we've got good, clear understanding and insights about what the company is doing now. Even better, people don't talk about it and they just use it and they get on to doing what they should be doing. The business owner talking about what decisions you have to make, where's our position, and how can we do better. And our stuff, the BI tools, the dashboards, are up there on the walls, and that's what people are using to drive those decisions. So you have to have a strong focus on the key concepts, and I'll get into that in just a minute. To enable the adoption, because those things will trip you up. Go to where the market is. I spent 4 years in marketing, and it's interesting. Get a market-centric view of your product, of your products that you're delivering. And you have to look inside of your organization like a marketplace for you, and you have to figure out where the spots are that you want to try to get into. And you know, you use people in the organization, especially leaders in your organization, to help drive that adoption. You have to be aware of your competition's benefits. There's all sorts of ways. It's not like when you're doing reporting and analytics that your company hasn't been doing it in the past. They have. And they've done it a long time. It has its benefits, and we're trying to do things better and faster, all those, you know, those platitudes. But you have to really understand that competition to be able to supplant it, to do better for your organization. So think about it in terms of competition. Sometimes the competition are your own tools, version 1 or version 2, and you're trying to do version 3. I always thought this was sort of interesting. Whenever you put a new generation of tools out there, the generation that you just put in, people are going, oh no, I like this old one. Every time you try to go to a new one, people are going, oh, the old one's better. And I said, well, geez, when I put in this first version, it was the same thing you were telling me about the version before it. So we're trying, right? That's true, right? So, you know, we go through this life cycle. So in a way, we build tools and we go to the next version. That's our competition as well. Build the foundation first. Build the foundation first, then go top down. What I mean by that, and you'll see I have a triangle diagram. The foundation, fundamental elements to be able to enable reporting, all those concepts need to be built and solid, and then go top down in the organization to engage leaders to help drive that, get them looking at things. And you have to have that foundation in place. And I'll talk about that a little bit, why that's important. Get high-level testimonials. I could talk about this stuff all day. I mean, I love this stuff. I love what I do. I'm really passionate about business intelligence and what it can do for an organization. And I could go into businesses and talk about it and get them excited, but it doesn't ever sell them like when another business leader starts saying, yes, you know, here's what we're doing with it, here's why it's important. Because now you get this peer-to-peer kind of thing going on in your organization. So usage data in the hands of business leaders is powerful. When I say usage data, adoption usage. So we measure how many people are using our tools to a very granular degree. We focus business intelligence tools on the usage of our business intelligence tools. And that's important for me to understand what the demographic is and where is it. I'll show you some of those graphs. But it's also really important to get that in the hands of your business leaders. Because I've had many conversations with a business leader who would say, oh geez, that's a great tool, Mike. Yeah, and we're using it. And I'm like, well, yes and no. Here's where you are using in your organization, right? This organization, here, nothing. They go, wow, I didn't know that. And if they're sold on the fact that there is an analytic that is important for their business and there's a knowledge about that, putting that usage information in the hands of the business leaders is very important. You have to be careful how you do that because you don't want them to be beating people up in their organization about it. So, but we're not opposed to that, I guess, if it's, but I think most leaders are pretty pragmatic about that they do it the right way. Manage your product line for value. You know, building numbers of reports, I always like to say more reports or more dashboards is not our goal. We have a lot of them out there, less than 1,000, but it's not to have 2,000 or 3,000. Trying to manage that portfolio to see where the value is the most important. I'll show you a Pareto chart. So you guys are familiar with Pareto charts, right? Pareto charts are great, no matter what we do in governance. You know, what's the right things? Where's the value coming out, and so forth. If you measure usage and adoption and value generation, it always draws a Pareto chart with a long tail of low use, fairly low value, and a high number of usage and value for a small number of reports. So you got to manage that product line, and make sure you have adoption measures in place. Okay, so I spent a lot of time on that, and I think that was pretty important. And I'll go back through those things as we go through. Here's the vision we set up in Dow in the very beginning. What we said is that we have 4 levels of the organization. Let me start from the bottom and work my way up. We want to have detailed line workers, information available to them. Analysts should be able to slice and dice through the data. Normal stuff, right? OLAP, all that kind of stuff, be able to see the data, spin it around, answer questions. This is the new stuff. Drive it up to middle managers with KPIs, right? More dashboard kind of stuff, right? And you want to be able to create insight and have them be able to drill into it to figure out, oh, okay, I see a problem. Where is the problem? Down here, these guys like to muck through everything. They like to muck through everything and see how everything is. These guys don't want to do that. They want to see more of the exceptions. So they want to drive insight and drill into it a little bit. The key here, and one that we're doing is getting to the top of the triangle to try to get at the executive level. How do the scorecards of the company, high level, that are sort of keyed into the fundamental strategies of the company, how can we have those kinds of tools at their fingertips and have this a continuum? These guys up here have all sorts of things fed to them today. And usually what it is, it's these people, right, taking stuff offline, putting in PowerPoints, feeding it up. And so we're trying to put that together in a frame. So here are the key concepts that I talked about. And all essential. Easy to use and understand. Cannot say enough about UI design. Very misunderstood. For a long time, we have these detailed tools, slice and dice, and analysts maybe don't key into that much. They want functionality. But if you're going to hit the high end of the triangle, it better be very easy to use, instantly recognizable. You want to be able to recognize what you're looking at, see those things, and then be able to drill in to make those insights actionable. Okay, I have a problem. Where is it? Is it in this region, this segment of my business? It's in this product line, along this customer, whatever it is. That's pretty standard. Once those actions happen, people now have this event, this collaboration event that happens inside the organization. I know I have a problem. Now you're getting on the phone or they're emailing people up or having a meeting. Hey, we have a problem. Let's go take some actions. After that event happens and they take actions, they want to be able to say, hey, did it work? You know, were those actions sufficient, or do we have to take more actions? And many times, even if those actions were sufficient, other things have changed in the organization that caused them to have to change their actions, because the outside world is always changing, very dynamic. We always talk about accuracy, single version of truth. We've heard that all over the place. Obviously very important in an organization. People spin around data with their own versions of the truth. It stifles good decision making. Relevancy is very important. This is the old thing about, you know, somebody says, oh yeah, I have a report for you. Send me an Excel spreadsheet that has, you know, 200 rows and 3,000 columns. I'm the other way around, right? 50,000 rows and 200 columns. And your data is in there somewhere that's important to you, right? I'm sure the answer is there. It's not very relevant though, so you have to get your tools to be relevant to the users, and that's different at different layers of the organization. Timeliness has to be refresh frequency, so you know complexity in your organization is not your friend. You want to have fast latency, low latency, and responsiveness as well. And we're starting to get this responsiveness with blade servers and memory technology. It's great. Right, we're being able to tackle all these things, and then finally security. You know, once you now are streaming all this stuff out to everybody in your organization, now all of a sudden everybody's worried that, maybe it's getting out of our hands. So I look at these concepts as very important, and actually I think of them as more foundational, because as technology moves along and as our industry moves along, this becomes like table stakes. You know, the ante up. Any one of these things could really trip you up. So I look at this, every presentation should have a triangle diagram. So this is mine. This is basically telling you what I just told you in the last two slides. Foundationally, we have reports, and underlying this is our source systems, where we have operational reports analyzing those things with graphical KPIs. This is the technology that we put over top of it, transactional reporting. We use SAP, and SAP ECC we're putting in, and we use BW for our main platform. Detailed reports, analytics on top of that, and scorecards at high level, and here's the users. These arrows are trying to show you sort of what we think are the drill paths for each one of these users. We think when somebody's using it, these guys are using up here, they're going to want to drill down a little bit to make it actionable. We don't think it makes sense or is very helpful to have these people drilling down to here. And there are plenty of people who will do that if you let them. Some people don't want to do it at all, and some people want to go down to the nth degree. You have to manage both of them, and you have to understand what kind of analytic managers you have in your organization. But anyway, this is a good one to take around because people can digest this pretty easily. And when you talk about it, we're always, we're always sort of talking about, see that report, we need something higher in the triangle. You know, we start referring to this thing, and instantly in the organization, people can start to conceptualize why an analytic that we have should be higher level and what it might mean. Okay, so let me jump into the product line a little bit. I didn't expect you to, be able to read this. It just is my slide that sort of points out that Pareto that I was talking to you about before. What I have here is the names of the tools, the analytics that we have here, and how much it's being used. So I have unique users, and there's a couple ways we did look at that up here, and you take a look at this tail. And by the way, this is not an exhaustive list. But this Pareto goes, will continue to about here somewhere in terms of my product line. And my product line still gets to the point where I get low usage. And you know what? We really stressed governance. The stuff that we built had gone through this big governance process that we said, no, we can't do that, and make sure it's high, and we chopped all this stuff off. And we still get this Pareto in use. But it's very effective to measure this after you've delivered, because it's funny, all the people who went through the governance with you, you go back and say, hey, you know what? Guys, we still need to work on making our governance better. Because if you could do more of these, focus our efforts on these, that's how we're going to really drive value in our organization, right? When you're down here, you know, granted, I'm sure you're going to tell me that, yeah, I don't have many users, but I have a few users. You know, some people are, you know, need that in your organization, but it's, you know, smaller numbers, you know, and there's a need in your organization. But if you want to really get out there and drive high usage and value organization, try to figure out how to get up here. And we did this through many waves of implementations, and every implementation we stress this. And after every implementation, it draws the same curve. Is there a question?
If I may?
Yeah.
How are you defining product line here? Is it report, metric, or feature, or what, how are you?
Good question. I define it, we tend to use the term report very generically in a company. But a report can be some kind of an analytic, an online screen analytic. It could be a scorecard, it could be a detailed report. I measure them all like that. And we actually think of them as somewhat of a hierarchy here too of reports. Okay, the other thing, another dimension of this is penetrating the organization. So level 0 in the organization is Andrew Liveris, and the people that work for him are layer 1, pardon me, and layer 2 are the people who report to him and so forth. And as you can see, well, first of all, this is a pretty high percentage of those people are users, because there's not many at that level, right? But I have them. I have people who are using at that level. But you take a look at this, at how you're penetrating the organization by level. This is probably not all that surprising. But I like to keep track of this to see where in the organization we're penetrating and how we're doing that. And making sure we have people up here, because if you get these people, it tends to drive these much more. The other thing is measuring usage in a different way. So this is based on navigations, this is clicks in the system, and number of unique users. And these are months. I didn't update this since last October, but we go through these plateau phases, and we're higher than this right now. We're like in this, you know, on a monthly basis, we get 5,000 to 6,000 users per month. And clicks in the system keep going up. I find it interesting adoption curves that happens with people. Clicks in the system don't necessarily tell you that, you know, if more clicks, is more clicks better? What ends up happening is when you introduce something new, people click more, and then they settle into a pattern of, okay, now I know where the value is in my tool, so they click less. So they go out there, and it's like the Gartner Height cycle a little bit. It's a peak, and then it settles down a little bit, and then it sort of gets into a mode of where it's most effective for them, because they were hunting and learning earlier on and not doing so much of that later. Yes?
On your previous slide where you had the organizations grouped to 1 to 9, right? Did you standardize that by kind of their function? Because I would imagine that, does it group nicely in your organization like that?
Yeah, that layer analysis merely is out of our hierarchy of who reports to who in the organization. So we know who everybody's supervisor is, so you can crawl through the data very quickly and decide who's at what layer.
I just didn't know what else you'd be able to gain by that, because those level 5s were using it, but you don't know what
It's not perfect, but I mean, there's a lot, by the way, so function is another way to do this, right? Take a look at organizational role and things like that. We do that kind of thing too. That's important. And we try to organize security in that way as well, to get natural groups of who are at certain roles.
So do you take this, I mean, it's an interesting concept. You take this further, so like, I mean, is there a chargeback model, so actually you know who are your most profitable users, to use the analogy?
I like that. No, we don't do that. What I try to do with the users who are high use users is use them as testimonials, but we highlight those kinds of things. We've been doing a lot of things in Dow in terms of making visible actions that our organization's taking on our main webpage. What people are doing in the organization to drive value for the organization happens across the board. I go mine this data, go out to users, get them to submit stuff, to get positioned on the Dow homepage, to get some accolades, and other people are looking at, wow, you know, you're getting your name out. So we're doing advertising using our webpage. By the way, you know, when we have 50,000 users hitting that thing, it's a big advertisement for So we do all those sorts of things. Again, my team is very technical. Me, running the organization, I understand that stuff. I'm focused more on the sales and marketing of our organization. So I look at this all the time, and we're monitoring it. Break it down a couple different ways. So as I told you, we're using our analytics to sort of study the usage here too. So this is just some simple things that we put together. So this one is looking at our usage by geographic world area. US is our biggest, as you might expect, but we're seeing take up in other parts of the organization, and this is pretty important to us because our tools are central. By the way, we have a single instance of SAP. Well, we have a single old instance, still running R2. Anybody else running R2? I think we're the last company that runs R2. But that will be, believe it or not, that will be done by this summer, and everybody will be on a single instance in Dow, ECC. We have those single instances running the whole company, and data warehouse. We have heritage, we have a thing called heritage systems, not legacy, right? Legacy is so negative, right? I mean, heritage, isn't it great? Our heritage data warehouse, which was custom built, we're moving that into our central data warehouse. But it's interesting, we're servicing this thing out from one location at our data center in Midland, and we're servicing the world out here. So we do have people in Asia, Australia, so forth. So all the kind of things that you need to do and tools have to be here. Low latency, you can't have chattiness on your wide area network. It's all web-based, obviously, these days, and each page is pretty small to make it fast and responsive to get all those key concepts. So we do all that kind of stuff. But I mean, ultimately, it sort of bears its way out in how well are you getting take-up. And sometimes these numbers, in terms of usage by that, are driven by how many users you have in that area, obviously, right? We have most of our population in the US. But also I do this different cut, so geography, and then by business. Pretty interesting, right? So our business is a big hierarchy of businesses, and we chunk them up into divisions. And our advanced materials division went on the system first, so they were the earliest adopters. Corporate is in here. I have a bunch of users that are on corporate. They're sort of tied for the top here. Corporate includes finance and commercial people and so forth. So you get a lot of usage in those areas. But you see what happens is you get other businesses that all of a sudden, you see acceleration periods here. This, we're making some substantial breakthroughs in here. And one of the things happened to us, the guy who runs this division, Joe Harlan, he's a user of this stuff. All of a sudden, you start seeing things trickle down, that top-down thing. And then, our ag sciences is coming along, okay. It was sort of a slow start. So, like I said, you have to look at this kind of thing as you go forward. I threw this in here about some mobile stuff, because this sort of gets at, following your market a little bit, okay? So I mentioned that earlier, so this is my example of that. Now, we deliver our tools out on mobile platform, iPad, iPhone, so forth. And the reason why we're doing that, well, it's pretty obvious, right? I mean, our mobile device trend is growing pretty rapidly. So as of October 1st, we had 11,857 mobile devices in the hands of our users. So it's a pretty good size market. And take a look at that increase in growth trend, right? It's growing pretty fast. And that's everything, iPad, iPhone, Android, and BlackBerry. You can't ignore this. If you have a trend like this going on in your company, you better understand it and follow it, because you don't want to find yourself in a place that if you're optimizing for a workstation, a laptop, that all of a sudden half of your user base doesn't want to work that way anymore. And we look at that, and our next version is going to be more of a tablet, something like this, right? A tablet, workstation kind of combination. But you have to pay attention to these internal trends when you're running your BI program. Somebody else is worried about managing this environment for us, but this is the enabler, or potentially a competitive threat to what we're doing in business BI area. So I threw this other one in here, just maybe for anybody here from BlackBerry. Interesting, blackberries were huge in Dow a few years ago. And then, this is pretty typical trend. So as you can see, we had our first reports that were out there were out in the BlackBerry. Well, since that time, we sort of switched courses, right? We still have a lot of iPhone stuff, but this is the one that's growing pretty good, iPad. We like this because it gives us, a rich platform, larger screen size to do bigger analytics. When you're talking about the iPhone, it has to be shrunk down into something that is more digestible and mobile. But this is real helpful for certain segments of our population, like our sales force and so forth, where we want to get some of our analytics right in our hands real fast. And bandwidth is helping this tremendously. Although it's still not pervasive, we still get lots of people who say, we want to have offline stuff, we want to download Excel pivot tables and so forth. So we're still supporting some of that stuff. But the more pervasive that we're getting with bandwidth and coverage and 3G and 4G and who knows what's next, right? 5G, I guess, but this is going to continue here. So I just wanted to point this out, that this is sort of follow your marketplace. There are a lot of soft elements to adoption. I mentioned this thing earlier, and I want to spend a little bit of time on this because I'm just cognizant of my time here. We've got until 10 after 10, right? So we're getting sort of toward the top of the hour. Do not discount these items, because after you've done everything right, these kind of things start coming into play. This is sort of like what happens when you're at the maturity phase here. New tools introduction can be threatening to your distributors. There were people in the organization that ran the old tools for the sole purpose of redistributing those things to the rest of the organization. This falls into two categories. One category that these people are like data scientists. They're like super analysts who really understand the business, and they create insight and they redistribute it. Those people, if you went up to them and said, hey, I have a better mousetrap, they go, thank God, I hate redistributing this, right? And those people will help. The other half are people that are just redistribution operations that really don't even know much about how the tools are used. All they're doing is cranking this thing out and redistributing it. Those people in your organizations, you have to know who they are, how they're organizationally connected, and how to deal with the fact that what you're trying to do through straight usage and adoption is going to be threatening to them. So that's a barrier that you have to deal with, and you have to deal with it, adeptly, right, and the right way in the organization. And the best way to do this is try to lift the organization and say, hey, what we're trying to do is get out of the routine stuff into higher value activities. What they're doing is they're worried about their jobs, right? So that's an important thing. Transparency is good. As a matter of fact, it's great. I've heard managers and directors talk about this in the organization. Some people go, I love transparency. This is great. For the first time, we can see everything. So some people go, right on. So now we won't have all these questions in our meetings about, wrestling about what the right numbers are. Some people love it. Some people go, is that the way the world really is? We just came out with a new analytic on our purchase spend that actually takes our purchasing spend from the whole company into one analytic. And it blows out the notions that people had in their head about how our purchasing was being done in certain areas for years. And people have built careers on these kinds of things. And now, we're the analytic guys coming in there with a new story. Well, people, first thing they go is, that's not right. Can't be. Because, and if you show them it's right, they're getting nervous. Because they had in their heads how the world was. They've been selling that for a long time. And now we're telling them something different. This is a big barrier that can happen to adoption. So you have to be aware of it, and you have to be able to deal with it. Central BI programs have this problem of the burden of this diversity management. People did all their little things and distributed stuff around, and they could, it doesn't, they could be a little bit loose on what their security is or how they name something. right? They had a little marketplace that they sent it into. Now we are trying to do something across the board. So things like what you call a sale is really important. And we try to do this consistently, right? And when we do that, and try to do that across the board, the people in each one of the organizations who are your competition, they go, you guys are, corporate trying to speak corporate language, and we're being more customer responsive to our little folks over here, right? And so that's an issue, right? Because we're trying to do it right and consistent. And what it is we can get the perception that we're being callous about, how people, how we're responding to our customer needs. Important thing to worry about, right? Manage the buzz or it will manage you. I was telling you about, how we would get some advertisement out there, on the corporate homepage. You got to create buzz. The sentiment, the Twitter sentiment trending of what's going on with your program. You have to manage it, and you have to make sure that you're listening to it and you're managing it. If you don't, threats can come up, and all of a sudden, before you know it, something else is going on, and you'll be spending all your time trying to unwind something or be defensive about something that you don't need to do. Expand beyond project scope, schedule, budget. This is the thing about scope, schedule, budget is great. It's the standard stuff we do through our PMOs. It's more than that. It's focusing in on value generation, and I talked about that before. And finally, make sure you run the program like a business. Simple as that. I have products, I have customers, I have sales of my products, that's usage, and I want to maximize that. It's not just sales, top line revenue, it's profitability, that kind of thing. So I'll go back to that first slide that I talked about. Let me just review to make sure that I've hit these. Be clear in the beginning that adoption is your goal. Talked about that, right? Strong focus on key concepts that enable adoption. We talked about that, right? So all that sort of table stakes. Go to where the market is. I just touched on that a little bit here, gave you some examples. A lot of aspects of the market. How your organization, how your businesses are set up and organized is important. That's a marketplace. How your organization reorganizes itself is always a challenge, right? Our business hierarchy is sitting over here, and the businesses are changing, and then there's different supervisors for different areas, and it's not like you just take multiple steps forward. We take 2 steps forward and 1 step back all the time, right? It's that kind of a thing. Build the foundation first and go top down. I skipped over that other goal, awareness of your competition's benefits. I think we hit that pretty good. High-level testimonials. Can't say enough about them. We talked about that. That usage data is important. Product line management, and make sure you have adoption measures in place. At the final one, we didn't talk about hugely, but what we try to do, I'll get to what we talk about a lot in the organization is where do we think we should be next year? And we actually put that in the goals of our organization. I think that's it. I'll open it up for questions. Yeah, you had one, sir?
Yeah, on the previous screen, you were talking about the second point, the focus on the key concepts. One of the points there was how you can drill into the actionable items. Mm-hmm. But then the next one was how to monitor your actions too.
Right.
So what kind of measures, tools, processes that you are applying or apply to do that? How do you monitor, what is the way?
The way so 2 ways to think about this. One might be is that, you took an action, so let's throw an analytic out that monitors that action specifically, right? I think it's more holistic than that, though. Ultimately, right, if you had the right set of KPIs that are trending the right and wrong way, people look at that and they say, these are good, and this one is the one we want to act on. And the actions are focused at fixing this one. Sometimes you fix one, and it breaks another. So this gets into this scenario planning, and we haven't done a lot of this yet, but as we go forward, we're going to do a lot more of this. It'd be nice to be able to have simulation, where people see problems, and then you can simulate, okay, we think the action's this, and if we take that action, what do we think the desired result will be? And then next time you come in, you can say, did that happen or not? You guys been here, right? This is pretty complex stuff because the things we're not measuring everything. We don't know how our real competition reacted, how the macro environment happened. Was there any major world event that happened, that start changing everything? But that's a dynamic world that we're living in. And we need to just be a player in that, to be able to make sure that the stuff we can control, we can give the business leaders the best possible term. So they take a decision, you could look at it next time, they're the same measures, we're updating frequently, right? And then it becomes their scorecard that they're bringing in. We have a vision that we're going to have rooms like this, maybe not this big, with screens and monitors on the walls that you could actually have analytics. I was just visiting P&G recently. They have these things called spheres across the organizations that are really cool. Very immersive, large screen stuff that people aren't there with their papers anymore. That's good stuff. And they get to focus in on the decisions. That's a future for us. Well, lots of questions. Yes, sir?
Your fourth bullet point there about your competition, what are some of that's the business customers solving their own problems, I think, is where you're going with that. What are some of the things you found helpful in making your centralized solutions more valuable?
Yeah, I think the way you need to think about this is that if businesses are solving their own problems, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? As a matter of fact, I don't believe that we're going to go after 100% of the business. I don't want businesses to stop being inquisitive and doing ad hoc kind of things. I want to push them more into the things that are ad hoc and less into the things that are standardized, and move this line closer, put it this way. If you had an environment that Excel is prevalent, Excel is still the big, everybody uses Excel, right? All this kind of stuff, right? All these tools, we still use Excel. The download to Excel button is still pretty important. If Excel is being used for 70% of the decisions in your company, it's better. But if it's used for 20 or 15% of people are doing ad hoc stuff with it, that's okay. And I think that's the flexibility you need. So I think that's the approach you have to take, is that you have to sell them. And I'm not trying to put you out of business. What I'm trying to do is lift you up and take you to another area and get the routine stuff that we can automate out of it. Lots of other convoluted kind of situations that can come out as a result of that, though. But that's one of the ones that I thought. There was another question here, sir. Yes, sir.
So this appears to be a corporate system. Is that tracking the sales or some purchasing? What business area?
Quick answer is yes. We track everything. So this is big, broad. We have every function in here. We do order tracking, sales, receipts. When I say sales, it's invoicing, inventory management, asset utilization, right? So we have maintenance systems in there. We have a full set of financials, full P&L, balance sheet, procurement side, right? What we're buying and selling. We have a huge, broad-based implementation of SAP.
So in that case, with that, how long take you to complete the project? What's the result?
I'm pretty old, I've been yeah, it's a big project. I mean, the company spent lots of money on it. It's been a long. Dow is a very interesting company. Dow was the first company one of the first companies to implement SAP. It was in the early 90s. That's why SAP R2. It was one of the first big companies. Funny thing was, Roman Haas I came to was one of the last companies to do it. We had all these homegrown systems. And so we had newer technology. Dow had the vision first of doing that. And master data management, Dow is a great vision of master data management, consistent processes, and so forth. 0 minutes remaining.
0 minutes. So I know there was some more questions. You're going to be around for
Yeah, I'll be around afterwards. Hey, thank you very much for coming. I hope it was